The Black Rose McQueen. I wanted to give a shout out to Ring IQ Boxing, and remember to tune in to the motherfucking relay.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay, where we're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this one. Mikey Garcia had this to say. He says, it's almost impossible for me to get a title fight at 140 pounds. The 32-year-old Garcia can't fight WBC, WBO champion Jose Ramirez because Ramirez is also trained by Robert Garcia, Mikey Garcia's older brother and trainer, Scotland's Josh Taylor,
We've got the IBF, doesn't it?
and the WBA. He's expected to face Ramirez in a 140-pound unification fight if Taylor and Ramirez win respective mandatory defenses versus Thailand's Apinun Konsong and the Ukraine's Victor Pascal. Quoted as saying, there's many fights at 140, but when you look at the politics and business, it's going to be a little bit more complicated to secure world title fights at 140, being that both champions are with a different promotional company.
They are.
One of them, Jose Ramirez, he's with us. He's a teammate of mine with my brother, Robert. So that's out of the question. I just don't feel that I'm going to be able to secure a world title fight at 140 pounds anytime soon. So I think my chances are better at 147. When I look at the politics and I look at the business, it's going to be almost impossible to get one of those fights for a world title at 140. And I don't want to just be fighting contenders and waiting. I actually feel that 147 pounds is a bigger challenge. But I still feel confident enough to accomplish what I want. I want to win a welterweight title. Garcia added, though, that he would consider facing the winner of a 12-round, 143-pound bout between former junior welterweight champions Regis Prograis and Maurice Hooker. There's still some very good fights, Garcia said. Even at 140, there are good fights, and I was already champion at 140. So it's not that there isn't interest in fights there. It's just that I think winning a title at 147 means that much more to me right now. I'm not saying I won't come back to 140. If the right fight is available at 140 for my next fight, I might be able to come down to 140. If it is, say Prograis or Hooker, even if it's a non-title fight, that's still a fight that can interest me. But I have to compare what's available at 147. If I don't have anything available at welterweight, that's exciting or big enough, then I'll definitely consider coming back to 140, where I can still have great fights and still add to the legacy by defeating other guys there. But the biggest challenge right now is at 147. And just because everybody thinks I can't do it, that actually motivates me more to show everybody that I can and I'm capable of it. I had to take my time with this one and really consider what it is that Mikey Garcia is saying, that it's impossible for him to get a title fight at 140 pounds. And
Is it?
upon reviewing the landscape, that there's actually truth to what Mikey Garcia is saying. There is. Nobody's expecting him to fight Jose Ramirez. Let's just get that right out of the way. Jose's training under his brother, so that's not going to happen. But as far as Josh Taylor, the WBA and IBF champion, Mikey's actually right. He can't get a fight with that guy either. He can't. Right now, there's already an order out for Josh Taylor to fight Apinun Konsong, who's his IBF mandatory challenger. We all know the IBF, they're sticklers for the rules. They take their mandates very seriously. Hypothetically speaking, if Josh Taylor were to skip Apinun Konsong, try to get a Mikey Garcia fight, not satisfy his mandatory, he would thereby forfeit the IBF title. The IBF won't hesitate to strip him for non-compliance. In that way, Josh isn't free to fight Mikey Garcia.
He's not.
Don't forget, Josh Taylor's got 2 belts. That's 2 separate sets of mandatories. And via the WBA, anyone from Mario Barrios, who holds the regular version of the title, to Ismael Barroso, who holds the gold version of the title, to Alberto Puello, who is the WBA's interim champion at that weight, any one of those 3 guys could end up being Josh Taylor's mandatory challenger via the WBA, and any one of those guys have a legitimate claim to fight him more so than Mikey, because Mikey's not a champion at 140. He doesn't have a belt, and in that way, you can't skip one of them to fight him. You'd be running the risk of being stripped. Now, we all know what the plan is. That if Josh Taylor makes it past his IBF mandatory challenger, Apinun Konsong, what's supposed to happen thereafter is the undisputed 140-pound title fight between Josh and Jose Ramirez. It's a fantastic fucking fight in and of itself. Mikey, he can't stand in the way of that. So he is right. He is telling the truth. That right now, here and now, it's impossible for him to get a title fight at 140 pounds. It is. That wasn't my initial interpretation. That wasn't my initial impression of Mikey Garcia's comments. But upon review, upon analysis, looking at the landscape and looking at what mandatories lie in wait, he's actually telling the truth. He's not just saying it to be saying it. He's not trying to decorate what he's doing.
He's right.
He's being honest. Right now, it is impossible for him to get a fight down there. So he's better off staying at 147, following suit, and chasing a Manny Pacquiao fight. Mikey did mention the possibility of returning to 140 to face the winner of Hooker versus Prograis. That in and of itself would be a sensational fight, although the outcome of that fight has yet to be determined. As we all know, we're all under self-quarantine, waiting for this pandemic to blow over, and that fight hasn't happened yet. When it does, perhaps Mikey Garcia can set his sights on that guy, whoever that guy is, whether it's Regis Prograis that emerges the victor, or Maurice Hooker, who emerges the victor. For now, Mikey is campaigning at 147 pounds. He's coming off that win over Jesse Vargas. Upon reading these comments from Mikey Garcia, I thought it important to shed light on the facts and the stats, the truth as it is. Because a lot of people might hear these comments from Mikey Garcia, myself included, and jump to the conclusion that those fights down there, those aren't fights that he wants anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, that was my initial impression of this article. But upon review, you know what? There is truth to what Mikey's saying. And in the spirit of fairness, in the spirit of objectivity, and looking at things through an objective lens, he's actually right. He couldn't get a title fight down there right now if he wanted to. So he's staying at 147 pounds, and he's chasing a Manny Pacquiao fight, as that is his most viable option to become a 5-weight world champion. He doesn't stand much of a chance of beating Terrence Crawford. Let's be honest.
No.
You already been there and done that. You tried it with Errol Spence, and that didn't work out for you.
No.
The only viable route to a world title, to become a world champion, would be to square off against Manny Pacquiao, and I so happen to think that that is a fight that Manny Pacquiao is receptive to. The fight makes sense for Manny, also makes sense for Mikey too, although I will say it is not a foregone conclusion that either one beats the other. You know that Mikey Garcia was recently quoted as saying that my brother and my father still feel I'm too small for 147 pounds. That pretty much accents what I'm talking about. He was quoted as saying, my dad was happy, my brother was happy that I won. They still tell me now that I did it. Maybe I should consider coming back down to 40. You know, they still feel that I'm a small fighter at 147. I'm too small. My dad especially. He tells me that 140 pounds should be a better weight for me to fight at. Men at 140 are more comparable to my size. You know, he still tells me all the time, you started at featherweight. I was a featherweight, you know, so size-wise, I'm not a big guy. I still feel that my abilities, my skills are allowing me to compete at 147, and I feel I can win a title at 147. I mean, that's part of the challenge. I want to challenge myself.
Why don't you fight Terrence Crawford?
We talk a lot, Garcia said. We get together daily, and we talk about boxing, my career, you know, and other options. But in the end, it's still my call. They agree. They understand that it's my call to make the decision. But I do consider their opinions. I do consider it very much, and I do see their reasoning behind their opinion. I do see the reason they feel 140 pounds is a better weight class for me. But like I said, when I look at the politics and I look at the business, you know, it's going to be almost impossible to get one of those fights for a world title at 140. I don't want to just be fighting contenders and waiting and waiting and waiting. You know, I actually feel that 147 pounds is a bigger challenge, but I still feel confident enough to accomplish what I want. You know, I want to win a world title at welterweight. My dad also knows that I have the skills to do it. My brother knows I have the skills to do it. But it's a dangerous move. It's dangerous fights. It's a bigger challenge, and you know, it's part of the risk. You know. But it's also part of the reward. You win a world title in a 5th division against, you know, a big welterweight champion that nobody believed you could do it against, you know. That's in the history books, and that's what I'm after. Yeah, right, Mikey. Well, you want to fight a big welterweight champion that nobody thinks you can do it against, you'd be looking at Terrence Crawford, not Manny Pacquiao. There are obvious reasons why you're looking at Manny Pacquiao more than you're looking at Terrence. You weren't ever looking at Terrence. And I'm not trying to be overly critical here. It's just that if this is what Mikey Garcia is trying to characterize, a situation where he's taking on a welterweight champion that nobody favors him to beat, a welterweight champion that is the biggest challenge, as these are Mikey's words. You know, these are the biggest challenges. Okay, well, Terrence Crawford would be your biggest challenge at this point, not Manny Pacquiao. You're looking at Manny Pacquiao for obvious reasons, because Manny Pacquiao's dimensions are very similar to your dimensions, because Manny Pacquiao is at the tail end of his career. He's 40 years old. He's an older guy than he used to be, and this is why you're looking at him as opposed to Terrence Crawford. Just as well, let's be honest, folks, Manny Pacquiao can still sell a fight. He's still a bigger name than anyone else at this weight, so you get all the rewards without all the risks, as Manny is quite formidable, even today, but he's not the biggest challenge for Mikey Garcia at 147 pounds. If we're gonna look for the biggest challenge for Mikey at that weight, that's Terrence Crawford. It's for that reason you don't see Mikey looking at him. It's for that reason you don't see Mikey calling him out. I mean, if he felt that fight were going to be as easy as, say, the Broner fight or the Lipinets fight, if he felt that a Crawford fight was going to be as easy as those fights, don't you think he would have fought him by now?
Yeah.
You say you want to be a 5-weight world champion. You say you want to be a 5-division champion. Well, if you felt that it was a viable route via Terrence Crawford, if you felt that you could beat him as easily as you beat Broner, as easily as you beat Lipinets, if you felt it was gonna be easy, you would have done it. But there's a reason you haven't done it, and there's a reason you have no plans to do it. It's because that's the biggest challenge. Not Manny Pacquiao. The biggest challenge for Mikey Garcia and just about anyone at welterweight is Terrence Crawford. And I'm not trying to convince you that there are no risks involved with Mikey fighting Manny. There are risks involved with that fight too. There are. There just aren't as many risks involved with fighting Manny as there are with fighting Terrence, because there's not much chance of Terrence Crawford getting old overnight as opposed to Manny. Manny who's in the twilight of his career, Manny who's 40 years old. Yeah, there is a chance. There's always a chance that a fighter in Manny's age group might get old overnight, that he might have looked sensational in the Keith Thurman fight, but in his very next fight, his age might show up. There's not much chance of that happening with Terrence Crawford.
You're right.
So I acknowledge that there are risks involved with a Manny Pacquiao fight. It's just that there are that many more risks involved with a Terrence Crawford fight. And that's what makes him the biggest challenge for anyone at welterweight, not Manny. No doubt it's for this reason that both Mikey Garcia's father and his brother, they think he's too small for 147, because if you put him in there with a good boxer, with good boxing acumen, certain physical attributes, certain characteristics, it's going to be a very long night for Mikey Garcia. I take you back to the Jesse Vargas fight, his very last fight, the fight that we just saw. Early in that fight, while Jesse was using his height, his reach, his boxing,
Mikey didn't look good.
It wasn't till Mikey got through with a very hard shot, took some of the fight out of Jesse Vargas, caused him to simmer down. It wasn't up until that point that Mikey found his way into the fight. And even after that, he couldn't close the show.
Nope.
He couldn't finish Jesse Vargas. And this more or less accents what both Mikey's brother and his father are talking about. Jesse Vargas has always been a solid guy, good boxer, but he's never been the biggest puncher or the best physical specimen. He's tough. He's got buckets of toughness, but he ain't no Terrence Crawford. And if you couldn't close the show against Jesse, even after hurting that guy, what the hell would you do with a Terrence Crawford?
Get your ass kicked by him.
Jesse Vargas, this is a guy who characteristically starts off strong, then fades down the stretch. I mean, this is a constant with Jesse Vargas. Whether you're talking about this Mikey Garcia fight or the Adrian Broner fight, it's characteristic of Jesse to start off strong, maybe even gain an early lead, and fade down the stretch. Whereas with Terrence, it's the opposite. Oh, he'll give up those early rounds, 1 or 2 of them, maybe even 3. And all the while, he's downloading information and getting into a groove, getting into a rhythm, so that by the midpoint, he's got you pegged. He's got you figured out. And I don't think he'd have to work all that hard to figure out a guy like Mikey, who's a great boxer, sensational. I rate him. He's a good fighter. He's beaten a lot of world champions. He's been a champion in 4 weight classes. But he's not quite cut out to be a welterweight. And that would be evident. That would be a factor in a Terrence Crawford fight, more so than a Manny Pacquiao fight, as Manny Pacquiao has buckets upon buckets of experience at the weight, although in terms of being a physical specimen, Manny's still on the smaller end of the spectrum. He's still a little guy, and that opens the door, especially now that Manny's 40. That opens the door for a Mikey Garcia versus Manny Pacquiao fight to be competitive, whereas Terrence Crawford fight, that could turn out to be anything but competitive. There are big risks associated with that one. Now, if we're going to address the risks associated with a Pacquiao fight, and there are risks, there are, reiterate, it's not a foregone conclusion that either guy beats the other. The risks associated with a Manny Pacquiao fight is that he still has enough left in the tank for a Mikey Garcia, because he certainly has more experience at this weight against a better quality of competition than what Mikey has seen so far.
Obviously.
We forget, Manny beat Jesse before Mikey did. Manny beat Jesse and took his WBO title.
Years ago.
Did you guys forget? Tim Bradley vacated his WBO title so that he could have that rubber match with Manny Pacquiao, and the title was up for grabs. It was up for grabs in the Vargas versus Saddam Ali fight. Vargas won the fight. He subsequently defended it against Manny, who had beat Tim Bradley, and he lost it to Manny. It was years ago, okay? Manny's already been there and done that with what is your best scalp at this weight. There's no question who's more experienced at this weight, or any weight for that matter. You think about the base styles of the fighters, the characteristics of a Mikey Garcia versus a Manny Pacquiao, and you know, Mikey's a skilled boxer, no doubt about it. I mean, he is really one of the best and brightest fighters in the sport of boxing. Characteristically, he's not the busiest puncher. He is not the most prolific guy out there.
He's not.
Doesn't have the volume of punches that Manny Pacquiao has, even here today at 40 years old. Mikey is more of a sniper, more of a sharpshooter. Whereas Manny is more of a Gatling gun. So you look at the situation that Mikey's not the biggest guy.
He's not the busiest.
So how does he keep Manny out? What does he have in his arsenal that could serve as a deterrent for Manny Pacquiao to keep Manny out of his sweet spot? Well, Mikey's got that jab of his, that trademark up jab, and it's a great jab. The problem with that is Manny's a southpaw. Manny's jab could come in over the top of Mikey's, thereby taking away one of Mikey's best weapons, as Manny's angle of entry will allow his jab to come in just outside of Mikey's. And lest we forget, Manny's bouncy. He's got a pep in his step, thus keeping your lead foot on the outside of his could prove tricky when he's constantly bouncing in and out of range. In that situation, Mikey Garcia would have to rely on his timing in the hopes that he could time Manny Pacquiao upon entry and nail him with a hard shot on his way in, although that also could prove difficult because Manny's a busier fighter than Mikey, and that might affect Mikey Garcia's timing. It's that much harder to time a guy when you're spending time, a lot of it, avoiding getting hit, avoiding punches. And then you think about punches, punching power. Which one of these two guys packs the bigger wallop? And at least based on their track records, that edge would go to Manny. So he's more experienced, he's a busier puncher, a bigger puncher, and the only thing really working against him is that he's a lot older than Mikey is. It's a bit of a wild card as to whether or not time has ravaged Manny Pacquiao's trademark qualities, characteristics enough to where Mikey can get into this fight. It's a wild card. We don't know. That's why I'm telling you, there are risks involved with this fight. There are risks involved with this fight too. It's not a foregone conclusion that one beats the other.